Hello, viewers, and welcome to Claims Explained. My name is Sal Castillo. I'm the director of the Texas Veterans Commission Claims Department. And with me, I have Mr. Juan Amaya. He's our operations manager for the Claims Department. And essentially, what we want to do today is kind of just talk, a free flow talk, and a conversation about a lot of the misconceptions about the claims process. There's a lot of information out there. We want to go over a couple of things just to have a conversation and have that information shared with our viewers, anybody that's interested in getting to know really what is behind the claims process. And we'll try to explain it in a very pragmatic way. Isn't that right, Mr.?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm a Air Force veteran. Also, I did Army. I joined the Army and
One Air Force veteran myself.
year in the Air Force. So we've done this for several years now. I think
Yep.
I'm hitting my 16th year representing veterans and their families
Mhm.
in Texas and other areas as well, other states, and sometimes our veterans live abroad. So we're not limited just to being here in the United States. Well, Juan, going back, I remember I was a county service officer at that for about 10, 11 years. And it was a very gratifying experience because you're helping people every day and their families, and you really change their lives, right?
It is.
Um, it's just such a broad space out there. What has been your experience? Like, how long you been doing this?
7 years almost, right? And so it's been a very rewarding experience. Starting off as a county service officer as well, there working in Cameron County in South Texas, up until about 4 years ago, I was in Georgetown, there in Williamson County, as their director of veteran services, and then now here at TVC, going on my third year next month. So it's been
Time flies by.
time does really fly by. And so, being here with the claims department, getting to have a bigger reach, right, with Texas, it's been a great experience because, we do so much, within our department, because I feel with our department, it opens up a lot of avenues for other benefits with other departments within the agency. So,
It's kind of like the foundation, right?
yeah.
You build yourself up to
Yep,
the benefit.
and talking about foundation, right? That's something that we will, discuss here in a little bit with some elements that need to be met for that service connection for these, service connected disabilities.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've seen so many different cases, tough cases, very difficult cases, and we have to make sure that we're knowledgeable on the law. And then we have to kind of think out of the box, right? Did we miss anything? What is out there? I think one of the biggest things, and you tell me your experience and what you heard, but one of the biggest things is like, you ask veterans and they say, well, I wish I knew this way before I would have applied and I waited so long because I had a perception of it or a misconception. Somebody told me about things. I tried it, and then I just kind of got disheartened. And that's it's really not the case, right? The NDA doesn't want to just turn you down. They don't have a personal level of saying I'm going to turn as many veterans down. No, everything is dictated by the law, right? And you
Yep.
got to meet those criterias. Um, let's get into it. Like,
Yeah.
what is the main purpose, I think, of having a conversation here is I know I'm passionate. I know you're passionate. I know we have a lot of staff members that are passionate, county service officers and advocates that are passionate about it. But truly, what do we want to do? Everybody wants to win, right? I think that's a discussion that I want to win my case.
Right.
I know I should have it. I'm eligible for it. I know it happened. I know it's still affecting me. I want to win, right? So navigating the VA is very difficult. But how do we truly win?
hmm
Let's get into that a little.
Yeah, I feel that like you mentioned earlier, right? There's a misconception there sometimes with the veterans, especially if they get denied, um, they just give up, right? It's never about just giving up because sometimes they're not told about the elements that needs to be met, right? And so it's something that the VA has, given to us. There's a law, right? Which is called Hickson elements, right? And those three elements, need to be met with every, case when it comes to service connection, right? So, um, medical diagnosis, right? Medical opinion, and then connecting those two, right? So,
Yeah, with that, Hickson elements, those case I believe in 1999, right? And so that created a precedence as to what the VA requires you to submit. It has to be facts. And there's 3 elements to it.
Right.
And you briefly touched it. So basically, you have to have proof that it happened in service, one way or the other. And we can get more in depth of 5 ways to get that. So you have to have proof that it happened in service. You have to have a current diagnosis because you can't get paid for something you don't have.
Yep.
And a diagnosis often gets confused with symptoms, right?
Yep. Yeah.
I see sometimes, in the applications is like, I have back pain. Okay, well, that's a symptom. What VA is looking for is essentially, what do you have?
Yeah, an example would be like a lumbosacral strain. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those things, and a lot of times there's a confusion between a symptom and disability, and it can be very frustrating. If you don't know the difference in there. But yeah, they want a medical diagnosis. That explains to them what exactly do you have,
Right.
and they want that medical diagnosis being provided by whom? Juan, I mean, it's got to be a doctor.
Medical doctors. You got your specialized doctors, right?
Yeah, your
PAs.
physicians and stuff like that. But then that's the second element. The third element is probably the hardest, and I think the top one is to get the favorable medical opinion.
Right.
What is a favorable medical opinion? Well, basically, it's a medical practitioner that says, well, since I examined him through the composition and pension examination known as CMP examination, right? What they're going to determine is, whatever you have now, whatever medical condition you have now, is it at least as likely as not?
And more than likely than not as well, right?
Well, it's more than likely than not. The rhetoric is pretty much very legal. But basically, all it says is, I examined this individual, this veteran, and what he has seems to be related to service, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be 100%. At least it's like that 51% chance that it probably is related to service, right? But there's a lot of laws and regulations. There's a Part 4 from the CFR 38, right, that we have to know, and then the M21 manual that they have in there. So we're educated on all those things, and we have the experience to go about it, right?
Talk about experience accreditation, right? It matters so much. Yeah.
So why is it important? Why is accreditation so important?
It's important because it allows us, the VA, right, allows us to have access to the veterans' files and records, right? Service treatment records to VA records to what they filed for in the past. It's a huge, deal to have, right? To help
You're
us.
vetted by the VA.
Yeah, vetted by the VA.
Authorized by the VA.
Yes.
And how do you get that accreditation? I mean, how do you get authorized by the VA? What steps do you have to take? What do they do on their part to give you that accreditation or authorize you to represent?
Yeah, it's a long process, right? To where they're getting with our employers and asking them of, who we are as employees, and
They do a background
check.
Yeah, they train us on ethics. They train us on so many
Yearly training too.
yearly training. You have to be, every year you have to go through that training, and you have to be, in good standing. Yes. You have to be a paid employee.
1,000 hours.
Yeah, paid employee with 1,000 hours a year that you're actually advocating for veterans and representing them. And when you have those things, the VA has developed a system that it minimizes, the area of fraud or errors. And so you really want to look for somebody that's accredited because you don't know, right? The other thing that goes along with accreditation, we get access to VA critical systems.
Yes.
So we have VVMS. Explain more or less what VMS?
Yeah, Veterans Benefits Management System, right? It's, through the VA, and it's just a portal of all records that the VA has, right, for the veteran, right? So like I mentioned earlier, their service treatment records can be in there, D-214, military personnel file, VA records. So it's like I said, it's extremely helpful to have that in front of you when you're assisting a veteran, because if you don't, you're gonna go at it blindly. And it's hard and difficult at that time to
So, to expand on that, the VVMS is so crucial because you have everything in there, right? You have, like you said, you have their military record, service treatment records, then you have every decision,
prior decision,
every application.
yeah.
So you really can go back and investigate, what happened, what transpired, what decisions were made, some comments. Why did they get turned down?
Yeah.
So it's crucial. Otherwise, you're just flying blind.
And so what happens there too is
if you're flying blind.
And what happens there too is that you find cues which are clear and unmistakable errors on the VA's part from prior decision letters or from prior CMP examinations, right? That you can make arguments for the veteran, right? Stating that, hey, this is where you made a mistake, right, on the VA's part. And, with those cues, they could, if, found that they were a mistake, they can get backdated years, years, right? So
That's where the big checks.
as the big checks come from, the big back pays come from that.
So if you were to, anywhere and you're talking to a veteran, right? A lot of the times what the impression that I get from them are actually the statements that they tell me is like, you know what? Nobody really took the time to explain this whole thing with me. And I try to explain everything very simple because there's so much. It gets convoluted, right? So many regulations, so many things. So let's look at that. Let's take a little bit more into it. What makes a claim successful, right? From your experience.
Right.
Can you share with everybody?
So,
It's successful.
yeah, a successful claim is ensuring that, once again, the elements are met, right? If without those elements being met, you're not going to get service connected, right? Laws pass a lot of these times, right? A couple years ago, we had the PACT Act passed. Before that was the Blue Water Act, right? And so, these laws are constantly changing, which we have one that they're trying to propose here, in the future. But these laws change to where they allow veterans from prior wartime periods, right, to be now, eligible for service connection, right? So, yeah, those elements are extremely important, right? So, um, making sure, that whatever it is that you're filing for is, in your service records, or if you're in the area of, right, we can get into the fixed elements once again, right?
Yeah.
So, you got your direct service connection, right? Secondary service connection, presumptive, and aggravation of injury, right? So if you had something, injury, or say you had tore your meniscus prior to service and that got worse while you're in service and after you separated, then that you can file for that, right? And then, of course, the mistake or error in the VA's part medically, right, which is a Section 1151 claim. So you got those five, different avenues.
Just for clarification, you
Yeah.
got your Hickson elements, right?
Mhm.
In the very first element that you have to present,
Right.
these are the categories or methods or ways,
Yes.
pathways to
Yeah.
get service connection.
Yes.
So just repeat it one more time. So you have direct service connection.
Direct service connection.
Give me an example of that.
I separated my shoulder while I was doing, physical training in the service, right? And then you went to go see the doctor. Doctor diagnosed you with shoulder separation or shoulder impingement, syndrome or something. And so they, you have that in your records. That way, whenever you separate, right, you show that happened in service, and then, you go see the doctor after you get out, and you got a continuation of care, right? Well, that directly happened and occurred in service.
Where?
So that's one element.
So that's direct.
Direct service, yeah.
So then you mentioned the second one. What's the second one?
Secondary, right? So now, right, I have a shoulder injury and a condition that I have to deal with, right, after a separation. I start having numbness and tingling in my fingers and hands or elbow, right? And so you can claim that as a secondary
So
condition.
basically, you have your primary,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was primarily an injury that happened in service. Then all of a sudden, that is causing a secondary condition.
Yeah.
And this is where secondary,
This is where the secondary issues happen.
you get granted for a secondary, numbness and tingling, maybe loss of use or strength in some cases. And that condition will be service connected as a secondary condition to your primary condition.
Yeah, and definitely, and it matters a lot because it can, depending on the severity of that condition, especially like numbness and tingling, right?
Mm.
The way the VA rates is mild to moderate to severe, right? So if it's moderate or severe, I mean, you can get 20+%, right, for those.
Can I ask you something? What if I have flat feet and I want to connect it to my shoulder?
Mm.
Could you submit that? I mean, you can submit anything.
It's going to be tough, but it's like playing connected dots, or I like to think whenever I was a kid playing Operation, right? So you got to, make sure that everything's connected first. You can definitely do your shoulder to your neck or your neck to your shoulder, right?
In
It's
the
in the vicinity of the area of your conditions, right? But you want to make sure that those, conditions are going to be tied
Right.
to each other.
It has to be tied. It has to make medical sense.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And we're not medical practitioners,
No.
but we do have common sense of saying, you have to have an explanation. Why do you feel, or why do you think that your feet is connected to your shoulder, or it could be any conditions that you're connecting it.
Mm-hmm.
But more so, what proof do you have?
Yep. So, yeah.
Because that's what VA is looking for. The proof. Like, how do you connect it?
And I think it's important too at that point, right? An orthopedic doctor, right? They're specializing in those types of conditions, right? So having their opinions or seeing them with their medical evidence holds a lot of weight.
It has to make sense. Like, you can't just do that. So, and then we continue on with other ways. So you have the primary, you have the secondary.
Right.
What's the third?
Presumptive. Presumptive. So that's meaning that, say, I'm an Iraqi war veteran, right? And I was exposed to burn pits, unfortunately, but I was in the area of Vietnam, right? Vietnam, you got Agent Orange, right? So, being exposed to those chemicals, or even with your MOS or your AFSC with your jobs, right? The exposures, right, of those chemicals.
Just for our viewers to have a little bit more clear understanding of this. So this is a presumptive, right?
Mm.
Presumptive, what we know what it is. You're presumed to have something because of something else.
Right.
But give me an example. You're saying, let's go with Vietnam, right?
Okay.
So what does the law say about Vietnam veterans when it comes to Agent Orange?
Right.
This chemical was utilized.
Mm.
You can't apply, in your application, you can't say, oh, I have Agent Orange. No, that doesn't make sense. No. What it is a chemical that you were exposed to.
Right.
What you're going to put in there is, I have diabetes.
Yes.
Yeah, the reason I have diabetes is because I was exposed to Agent Orange.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
And
what do you need to prove for that to actually be service connected?
so the VA, right, they've been really good as of late, right? They do a TERA, right, which is a toxic extreme risk activity check, right? And so with that, they go in and verify that the veteran was indeed in the area of those exposures, right? Especially like we mentioned the Blue Water Act earlier, right? And that was passed in, I believe, 2019. And so, that allowed Navy veterans that were within the nautical miles of, the exposures for Agent Orange, right, to be now eligible for service connection for the list of presumptive conditions, right? But yeah, with that TERA, the VA verifying that the veteran was in the area of, then yes. And then, of course, having one of those conditions that they're diagnosed with on the presumptive list, right?
So just kind of for clarifications, let's stick with Vietnam, right? So, and then it's not just Vietnam. It's certain areas that pact included in there because they knew that these chemicals were
Used a lot of places.
used heavily, and they were exposed to these chemicals, right?
Yep.
So the number one criteria at one point was basically, the way very pragmatically is, if you were boots on the ground for at least one day in Vietnam,
Yeah.
right, or in these other locations, then there's a list of conditions
Yes.
that the research they've done has determined that those conditions are related to being in that location.
Right.
And so that's kind of one of the presumptives, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in Vietnam for at least one day, and then you develop, what's one of the conditions, the top one?
Yeah, like diabetes.
All right.
Yeah.
So if you have diabetes and you were in those in the vicinity, or in those things that the VA recognizes as being exposed to, then you submit your claim, you have a diagnosis, you prove that you were in Vietnam for at least one day, and then more likely you're going to get a medical opinion related one to the other, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that's one way. Now, the presumptive also goes, and you kind of touched on this, and I want to make sure we bring it home for everybody that's watching,
Mm-hmm.
is you had an MOS, right, or a military occupational specialty, or depending on what the branch of service, basically your job.
Right.
So what was your job, and what did it expose you to? And so, like, let's say, for example, aircraft mechanic, right? Very simple.
JPA, Phil. Yeah.
So what is the number one claim that they usually submit for?
Yeah. Exposure to fuels.
Fuels. What about loud noise?
Loud noises. Right. Yeah. Tinnitus.
So tinnitus and hearing loss, right? As they were exposed to it. So let me phrase it very pragmatically here. If you were an aircraft mechanic, you are presumed to be exposed to loud noises.
Yes.
And if you're exposed to loud noises based on the medical research out there, then that causes tinnitus, which is that ringing in the ear, or some people call it tinnitus. But then it also causes hearing loss. I mean, it's common sense, right?
Yep.
You're supposed to 8 hours or more, or and then you don't have hearing protection. We've evolved and we got better, but a lot of people were not, right? If you're in combat and you're shooting your weapon, you're not going to put hearing protection because
Yeah, it's the least thing you're gonna worry about.
so
Yeah.
so that's exposure to it. That is a presumption of things, right? You're an airborne troop and you have back problems and knee problems. It's because you were jumping out of airplanes and you're hitting at 10, 15 knots the ground multiple times. That raises the preponderance, or the chances that we can presume that because you jumped out of airplanes, you have problems with your knee and your back.
Yep.
That's essentially it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the third one. What's the fourth one?
Would be the aggravation, right? Aggravation of
An example. Let's break it down so everybody.
yeah, no problem. So aggravation of injury would be I mean, you're a football player in high school, right? And you know, tore your meniscus playing football, and you're still allowed to join the military because whenever we're going through MEPS, they look at all that, right? Okay, now you're able to join the military, but going back to being airborne, right? Jumping a lot and everything, and then you re-injure your meniscus, and I would say that even causes more issues with your ACL or so forth, and it gets worse, right? It gets worse, and you separate out of the military, and now you're still, you've seen the doctor, and the doctor knows that your knee has gotten worse, right? Then yeah, it's aggravated, right? Because of that pre-existing injury that you had prior to service. Now that injury is worsened or causes more issues, right? So that's your aggravation.
Yeah, so somebody, Texas, we love football and we're always out there. And so you're in high school, you get injured, right? It gets resolved, good to go. And you join our military and you want to be an airborne troop, right? You're high speed, you want to get in there. Then you're jumping out of airplanes, and within a year you start having issues with your knee, right? That you hurt at one point in time, but then it should be documented in there that it progressed.
Yeah.
Not gradually, but pretty quick.
Yeah.
Right? That indicates that it got worse. It got aggravated as the service as you were providing in the military. And the military said, hey, come on in, you're good to go. And then all of a sudden you're starting to have knee problems, right? It's an aggravation of that condition. So I really drive it home for our folks out there because they have a lot of these questions. Make sure that they know how to get service connected.
That's the fourth one we got there.
Fourth one. What's the fifth one?
Fifth one is your Section 1151, right? It's pretty much a tort claim, right? With the VA, what happens there is it has to be service connected, right? The condition, right? It can't be just, you're not service connected for it. Say like, a veteran has issues, with their hand, but, was never, filed, for service connection or anything like that.
It doesn't have to be service connected.
Yeah.
Okay. You're just getting treated at the VA facility.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, something went wrong.
Something went wrong, right?
Not your fault.
Not your fault. Yeah. Something went wrong on the VA's part, and it created another condition or injury, right? And so you're able to file that claim against the VA, right? So,
well, if it's successful, and then you'll get service connected.
Yes.
Depending on the rating. But I have to say those are difficult sometimes.
It is sometimes. I had a veteran that I had assisted, and he had surgery for his back, right? Routine surgery. And the VA unfortunately ended up paralyzing him right from that surgery and the procedure. And so therefore, now that he's paralyzed from the waist down, filed the Section 1151 claim. They ended up giving him a special monthly compensation because of it, right? Said that, yes, they were at fault. Thankfully, he was able to receive that special monthly, and then on top of the grants, right, that he was eligible for. That happens a lot.
Those are. I mean, I feel like in my experience, those are very rare. But that is another way that you can get service connected.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so then you have those. So that's the first element, right?
Yeah, that's the first element.
Got to prove one way or the other is related somehow.
Right, for the service connection. Yeah.
Right. Then what's the second element?
Second element,
symptoms.
So yeah,
and diagnosis.
Symptoms and diagnosis, right? And so your diagnosis it's also extremely important because that's what we're following for, right? These conditions, and in which I see a lot, right? That the veteran will come in and say, "Hey, I got this. I have stomach issues and so forth. They're like, okay, well, have you ever gone to see the doctor? No, I haven't. Well, you have to go to the doctor for these symptoms so you can get diagnosed, right? Irritable bowel syndrome, right? That's, your stomach, you're having problems and so forth. Or, acid reflux, right? Okay, well, you have acid reflux, and regurgitation symptoms, but what is it? Is it GERD, right? The diagnosis is important. Without that, then you're not going to get that.
Yeah, they
Sort
can't
of
pay you for something you don't have, right? In order to get it, you have to go to a medical provider
Yeah.
and they have to assess it, you know, basically take a look at everything and then say, okay, yeah, this is what you have. And then they have a medical term in there
Yep.
to actually, which brings me to another thing. A lot of our staff have to go through a medical
Medical
terminology
Yeah.
class, right? So they're aware of all these different intricacies when it comes to the
Yeah.
medical field. Plus, we also, when we're training, we use, medical journals, research, stuff like that, where to find it.
Yeah, a lot of these conditions they're coded, right? So with the CFR, right? So they're coded, and they can be similar in nature, but they're be coded differently, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then the third one is, I want to say that a high number of claims get turned down because of the third one,
Mm.
right? Not always, but sometimes, you can get turned down if you don't have any of them, right? And sometimes veterans will just submit the claim
Yeah.
and with no information, and it's kind of hard. The VA has to collect everything.
Mhm.
I think, and I don't know if you agree, but in my experience, the best claims are the ones that have the most information. You're already answering these questions, the hexam elements, and they're providing that evidence. So when the rater gets it, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, to bridge everything.
It's quicker,
Right.
and you have everything there that you're answering basically all their questions before they're asking it.
Mm-hmm.
Here's A, B, and C. All the three elements are here. Um, but then they'll send you that CMP examination. So let's talk about the medical opinion. Like, what is the medical opinion, and how do they determine that?
Yeah, so the CMP examinations, right, that the veteran gets sent out to, they can be done by a medical doctor, right, a specialized doctor, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant, right. And then for your hearing loss and tinnitus, it's done by an audiologist, right. And so those CMP examinations, right, um, you mentioned earlier, it's really important what they say as far as giving their opinion,
Mhm.
because if they see right in those records, okay, all right, this is what happened. Okay, he was diagnosed, or he or she was diagnosed in service. This is what they're diagnosed with. Easy peasy, right? They'll, more than likely will get that service connection or a positive medical opinion, right? But if one of those elements are missing, like we were talking about earlier, right? The how to get it, tying it to your service, um, you know, or the diagnosis is missing, then the CMP examiner is going to look at it and say, okay, well, yeah, I'm going to give you
Yeah.
a negative medical opinion until you meet those elements, right?
It's very important, right?
It is,
I
yeah.
mean, it's essential.
Mhm.
You go in there, you communicate
Mm.
effectively, right?
Yeah, and the veterans get to ensure that they're being truthful, right, in the process, or speaking up, right, speaking up for themselves because this is well, not only for them, but it's for their families.
Yeah, they get the greeting and they're like, "How are you doing today?"
And you're just quiet.
Fine.
Yeah,
And that's it. And then the rater has no, or I'm sorry, the examiner has nothing to grab on,
mm-hmm.
right? So you got to be vocal. You got to
Yeah.
show examples of your symptoms. Be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the times that they sometimes focus on certain things, right? I'll bring an example.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you're applying for PTSD,
Right.
right? And what I see is that sometimes folks go in there and then they're saying, well, unfortunately I got divorced, and then they focus on, well, I got divorced and I don't have any money, and then my wife was upset with me or my husband was upset with me, and then we got into a fight, argument or what have you, and then we weren't getting along, and then we ended up in divorce. And they're, sometimes I've seen that they're saying, well, you're going through,
Yeah, that's really on why this is
that's a lot of people that are going through that. It's not necessarily related to service.
no, it's
you know,
it's imperative to
But
make
it's
sure.
imperative, right, to be sure that you're clear on what you're saying,
Yeah.
because you're just kind of touching the surface.
Mhm.
You're not really saying, when I talk to veterans, I say, well, how did you get to that financial stress?
Right.
How did you get to that argument or discussion with your wife or husband, what happened? Like, how are you thinking or how are you feeling, which is mental health is
Mhm.
about feelings and emotions, and what causes those things? Well, I get anxiety, and then I was late for my job because I have this, way of doing things because I can't stop at a red light, so I have to keep on moving.
Mhm.
So I got late to my work, and after 3 times they fired me. So now that causes my wife to be upset at me, and I have so much anxiety, and I get depressed sometimes that it turns out to be anger, and then I lash out, and then she's like, I can't deal with this.
Mhm.
Okay, that's very different than saying, we have financial problems and we have work problems. You're just stuffing the surface, and what they want to know is like, what is the cost of these issues? That's the
Yes.
result,
Yeah.
right? You have to say like, I got panic attacks. Um,
Yeah, or like going back to his like when I was in the military, I was in Baghdad and we're getting mortared, right? And I now I have severe anxiety because of that, right?
and you get triggers.
Yeah.
It's not like you try your best to go to mental health
Mhm.
and have your conversations with them, but it's something that's ingrained in you and embedded in you, and
Mhm.
it's hard and difficult.
Yeah.
But when you're going through these CMP examinations, to vocalize what the actual crisis is
Issue. Yeah.
there, the issue that I have panic attacks, and that causes this. I have intrusive thoughts,
Mhm.
and that causes this,
Mhm.
right? It causes me to have issues professionally and personally, right?
Mhm.
And give the examples. Just don't say it, give the examples.
Yeah.
And vocalizing and trying to communicate that effectively with the medical examiner is crucial. Otherwise, the medical examiner is just gonna
Yeah.
look at it
Look at the records of whatever he has in front of
and,
he or she has in
oh,
front of him.
yeah, he lost his job and that causes problems, but so did many Americans, right?
Yeah, I have an example, right? As far as why it's really important for CMP exams is there was a nurse that I was assisting, right? Was security forces and Air Force, while she was in the military, and as security forces members, you carry a lot of gear and everything,
Okay.
especially as deployed, right? Well, whenever she went to her CMP examination, she mentioned that she was a nurse, and nurses work 12, 14 hours a day, like a very long time, and they're always on their feet, right? So she started, talking about that more than what happened to her in her service, right? And so provide a negative medical opinion, unfortunately, because the person that was doing that opinion for her stated, oh, well, the reason of why you have this condition is because of, you being on your feet or like that. And that's why it's like, yeah, the person during that CP examination has to focus on their military service and what happened to them and what they're filing for. Right. You gotta that's the important thing is proving that whatever it is that you're, filing for is tied to your service.
In my experience, I've talked to a lot of veterans and their spouses, but mainly veterans, and they always say, well, I was in service. Don't they know that?
Yeah.
They should have my record and all these things when, the VA is asking for all these documents. And truly honest, they have some records, right? But they still have to request them, and that takes time.
Yeah.
Um, but ultimately, you're your biggest advocate,
Yeah.
right? And we're here to explain the process, to actually help you with the administrative part of it, and then kind of help you collect your thoughts and put it on paper and convey that to the EA. But really, the burden of proof is on the veteran by statute, anyways. But that's kind of what I've encountered a lot of times is like, I don't have it. But going back and us, you discussing it with her and
Mhm.
saying, well, you were a nurse, and you tell me a little bit more about that. So that would fall in their what category? Presumptive.
Presumptive. Yeah.
Yeah, because her job required this activity,
Mhm.
which could lead to her developing
Yeah.
what she has
Of
now.
course. Yeah. And if there wasn't, records there, right? But if it's in, service treatment records, it's filed and everything like that. Cool. Yeah. File it, direct service connected. But there's so many ways to help out the veterans in that case, right? Statements, from spouses, especially for PTSD, because um, ask the veteran, okay, well, we're with your spouse while
Yeah.
you're in the military, and the spouse is there, says, yeah, we've been together for 25 years. And so the spouse sees a lot, right? They see the changes that happen, with the service member, right? So they can help out with, one of their personalized statements saying like, well, since I saw he or she, join the military and they deployed. This is how I saw the changes when they came back from the deployment up until whenever they got out of the military, right?
Or even spouses that, they just met after the fact. You're absolutely right. Sometimes, uh, being a veteran, you miss out on certain things that other people, because we consider it as normal. This is normal. We went in, we were trained to do and think a certain way, so it became normal at one point or another. Um, and so then when you come back to the civilian world, somebody that hasn't been exposed to any of that stuff will say, "Well, that's kind of not, as normalized behavior that society has." Um, and so then they're a crucial witness to that in a way, right? So the testimony is important to put in there and add,
Yeah, family members.
because the veteran himself misses a lot of things that they do. That it's kind of like little things that they do that the spouses pick up on it.
Yep.
Because they recognize it, right?
Mhm.
That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. It's just, we were trained a certain way, and it's going to be ingrained in us, and it's a survival tactic to a certain degree, and many different layers with it. So oftentimes we don't pick up on it. So it's good to have that, and it adds
Yes.
to
Yeah.
the claim.
Yeah. Builds a stronger case.
Very strong case, because the whole purpose of us doing this is to win, and we have to win within the regulation, right? And with the evidence, whatever the VA requires you to submit, it has to be submitted in there, right? Because you want to win. So that's basically it. So just very pragmatically, let's review over that, right? So
Yeah.
in order to win, one, I come to you, I'm like, I want to win, right?
Yeah.
And then your stance on that is,
You got your 3, right? You got your medical diagnosis, you're tying it into service, and to bridge those 2, that medical opinion.
so you're creating a stool, right?
Yes.
In order for that,
Well, you mentioned before the house.
or the house,
Yeah.
right? I always use the analogy of a house,
Mhm.
because you have the foundation,
Mhm.
which is the first element, right?
Mhm.
And that you went and you describe the 5 ways to get there: direct, secondary, aggravation,
Presumptive
presumptive,
in section 1151.
section 11. Okay, so there's 5 ways to get there. So that's the foundation.
Yep.
Right? Then you're going to build the walls, right? And
Mhm.
what does that mean? Well, you have to have the diagnosis, right?
Yeah, medical condition.
Medical
Yeah.
condition. You have to have the records, right? In service
Mhm.
and outside of service, right? And then that adds the walls.
And
Now you got to connect them all.
yeah, and the roof,
The
right?
roof connects everything.
Yeah.
So the roof is the medical opinion connecting one side with the other.
Yeah.
And it's at least as likely as not. So you're building a house. People, I don't know what the expectation is, but sometimes I get the expectation that there's like, they should know about it. Well, they don't. We wish we did, but they don't, right? So if you stick to these elements, and a very pragmatic way of looking at claims, you're going to be very successful. You're going to be very successful in getting service connection. So if you take these elements and build on them, just the conversation we have, you're going to be successful in winning the case. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stories out there, and I know that sometimes veterans focus on certain things. But key is having somebody that's accredited.
Yeah.
In our experience, you must be accredited because you have access to those systems, and you can look through all that evidence. And basically, what we're looking at is those 3 elements. Right?
Yeah. Going back to the right accreditation, important, right, for us here or for our veteran county service officers that we work with, partner with, and your other organizations, right? VFW, American Legion, DAV, right? Paralyzed American PVA, right? So those are organizations also hold accreditation, right? They have representatives, right, that could help out veterans, right? So it's important.
Yeah.
We need to have that access. Yeah.
Just kind of in closing, I'm kind of wrapping it up here, but if you look at it, the claims process, it can be a lot of regulation. There is no special sauce. Everything is dictated by
Law and regulation.
And the protocols that they have on way it goes. The only thing that I would say is that there is no special sauce. There's only proper way to submit. And if you submit your claim properly with all these elements, the considerations that we brought to you, then it goes through the channels a lot quicker and it's more effective on getting you granted, right? And that's why we're trained. That's why we're here. But we want to have this conversation because I think it's important for everybody to know, and they're hoping that we made it, very simple.
Yeah.
It's not that complicated. It's definitely not rocket science, right? But you do have to look at, critically on certain elements there. And I tell my veterans when I did a claim with them, or even a spouse, they say, we're a team. I'm here to advocate for you, but I can't do it without you, and you can't do it without me. So that's what you're going to get if you come to the Texas Veterans Commission or any of our county partners, is that you're going to get somebody that's looking out for you, an advocate that has been trained, has been vetted, and we know the process, but we need your help.
Yeah.
If you want to win, we want to win, and that's why we're here.
And I'd like to mention that with our department, we have 53 offices across the state of Texas, right? Extending from El Paso all the way to Texarkana, all the way up to Borger, all the way down to the Valley in South Texas, right? So 160 plus personnel with us. And the county service officers that are out there, right? You got 275 plus county.
We share the passion.
Yes.
We share the passion. What does it feel every single time we get somebody granted, right? Like today, we learned about somebody again, 100%.
Right.
It's so gratifying.
It is, yeah, because you're changing lives. You're changing lives for the positive.
Doesn't it feel like you're getting granted?
Yeah, it does. It's
you're not getting anything.
No,
other than the satisfaction.
The satisfaction of helping somebody out and seeing that their lives are changed, because it doesn't only affect the veteran, it affects their families as well, right?
Right.
Yeah,
it changes everything. It's a trickle effect that comes into Texas, right?
And I like to add to that is Texas has so many benefits when it comes to the service connection, into whatever percentages that you're receiving, right? That comes with it, right? So
because the VA is a federal program, but the state offers so many things.
Yeah.
We have to thank all our representatives that are out there day in, day out, looking at the legislative process.
We have to make things better for us.
And they're listening to their constituents, and they're looking at what better ways to serve our veterans. And I have to give a shout out to them. They really are passionate, and they really want to know what is affecting our veterans. And you see every legislative session that they go on through and present bills, right?
Yeah.
To advocate for veterans.
You got the Veterans Affairs Subcommittee for House of Representatives here for Texas, right? And the chair is a veteran, right? So
there's veterans and a lot of the committees out there, and then they do their job to try to advocate for veterans. We've seen that, and so we should really thank them out there. From the Texas side of things, but yeah, I hope we communicated more or less in a very simplistic way of how to get service connected. We are in the same boat. We work together with a veteran and their families to make sure that we do everything possible for you to understand and have the knowledge so we can win. Because that's the only reason we're here. We're here to help you win, and it has to be done together, making sure that you're bringing the proper evidence so we can present it to the VA. And the VA is not there to just wait until you die. No, they have the law, and they have to abide by the law, and we know the law, and so we know how to work with it. So for anybody that's watching this, leave us some comments. Let us know what you want, and come visit the Texas Veterans Commission. Go to our website, www.tvc.texas.gov.
And we're also located in universities, the VA hospitals, VA clinics, county offices, city offices, right? You name it. Just go to our website, like Sal mentioned, and you'll see, search in with your zip code, and it'll pull up the closest location for you.
Right, yeah. You can also go to the website of VA and look for your local accredited agent. It could be a county or a Texas Veterans Commission staff member. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a little bit off of it. That you can go forth. Some good information here. Simplistic, 3 elements. That's all you need, right? And then there's the 5 ways you can get service connection. So you have to have those 3 things. Build a school or build a house. Let's build houses. Let's make it successful. And so thank you, Juan, for
no problem. Let's help y'all win.
Conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aim high.